This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Today I want to talk about a story that's been in the news for the last month or so, the Equifax data hack. That's a specific story, and more generally, data hacks in general. As I'm sure you've heard, some computer hackers were able to get access to a lot of the data that Equifax keeps on consumers, including their names, addresses, and social insurance numbers. According to a statement issued by Equifax released on September 19th, in addition to the 140 million Americans impacted, the incident, quote, involves potential access to the personal information of approximately 100,000 Canadian consumers, end quote. It appears that most of the data relates to Americans, so unless you have an American credit card or other dealings in the U.S., your data may not have been stolen. Or it may have. We don't know for sure. Equifax has not exactly been transparent and forthcoming when it comes to telling us what's really happened. Apparently, they're sending a letter to all Canadians who were impacted, so presumably if you haven't received a letter by now, you may not have been impacted. Even if you weren't harmed by this incident, a lot of your data is in the cloud. So what can you do to protect yourself from future hacks, and what do I think the government should do to help protect us? Well, I've got a lot of thoughts on this subject. First, wouldn't it be great if debt came with a health and safety warning? You know, when you buy any kind of over-the-counter medication, there's all that fine print that tells you all of the side effects you might get if you take those pills. The law says you can't sell anything that might be dangerous unless it comes with a health and safety warning. Makes sense. On every show here on Debt Free in 30, I talk about the dangers of debt. So why doesn't debt come with a health and safety warning? Maybe it should. Did you realize that when you signed up for your credit card that the credit card company would be giving all of your data to Equifax? They do. That's how the credit reporting agencies work. There are two big ones in Canada, Equifax and TransUnion, and they get your personal data from the big banks and credit card companies when you borrow money. This isn't illegal. In fact, if you go back and look at the agreement you signed when you applied for that credit card or bank loan, there was a bunch of fine print that said, "We will be sharing all of this data with the credit bureaus." Before this big data hack, no one thought much about that, but now that we're thinking about it, wouldn't it be nice if there was a big health and safety warning in big print on every loan application you signed? I'd like to see big, bold letters that say, "Whatever you tell us may not be kept private." I wonder if a warning like that would change our behavior. Does the health and safety warning on a pack of cigarettes make you less likely to smoke? I assume that it must be a good warning for some people, or it wouldn't be there. Since I don't expect the government to create a health and safety warning on credit applications anytime soon, let's talk about what you can do to protect yourself from credit bureau data hacks. Let me start by telling you the most important point that you may not fully realize. You are not a customer of Equifax. You are the product. Let me say that again. You may think that because you can order a copy of your credit report from Equifax, Equifax is working for you. Nope. You and your data is the product that Equifax is selling to the big banks and credit card companies and any other company that wants to lend you money. You are the product. Equifax and TransUnion generate most of their profit from selling your data to the big lenders. It's true they do make a few bucks by selling consumers their credit score, but the big money is from their big customers, and that's why their priority is servicing their big customers, not helping you. Probably the biggest complaint I get from clients is that after they finish their bankruptcy or consumer proposal, they check their credit report and some of the information is wrong. There is one big bank that regularly reports a consumer proposal as a bankruptcy. So when you read your credit report, it shows the bank's name and your debt, and then it says included in bankruptcy, even though you never filed a bankruptcy. You filed a consumer proposal. This is extremely frustrating. And when we talk to that bank, they say, "Oh, sorry, that's just how our system does it." And when we talk to the credit bureaus, they say, We just report the information we're given, so if that's what the bank tells us, that's what we report. Why isn't the credit bureau more responsive to customer needs? Well, because you aren't the customer. You, and more specifically, your data, are the product. Once you understand that you are the product being sold, you now have more incentive to protect yourself. The obvious answer is to say, okay, I don't want my information to be sold, so I'm going to cancel all of my credit cards and pay off all of my loans and never have any credit again. Well, that would save you a lot in interest, but unfortunately, even if you paid off all of your debt and never applied for credit again, you would still have information on your credit report. Your name and birth date and social insurance number are still on your credit report even if you stop borrowing money. That's the problem. Once your information is in the cloud, it stays there for a very long time. So if paying back all of your loans and never applying for credit again isn't a foolproof option, what can you do to protect yourself? Well, here's my 8-point plan. First, and most importantly, check your credit card and loan activity regularly. Personally, I go online and check my credit card statement every 2 days. That's right, I don't wait for my statement at the end of the month. Every day or two, I go online and do a quick review of transactions and confirm that they're all legit. Guess what? Earlier this month, while I was reviewing my transactions, I found 3 charges for 3 taxi trips I had taken the day before in Toronto. Unfortunately, I was not in Toronto the day before, and I had not been in a taxi in a long time. I also saw that apparently when I was not in Toronto, I managed to have 2 meals at a restaurant in Toronto. I immediately called the credit card company, and they immediately canceled my card. They told me that my credit card number had been manually entered, meaning they knew that no one had my credit card with the chip and the PIN number. That's why they believed me that it wasn't me. It took 2 days for them to send me a new credit card, and they reversed the fraudulent transaction, so it didn't cost me anything. In my case, the total that I was hacked for was around $300, so it wasn't a big deal for the credit card company. But if I had waited a month to find the problem, it would have been a lot more money, and perhaps the credit card company would not have been so eager to help me out. So, point number 1, go online and check your transactions regularly. If there's a problem, contact the credit card company immediately. Advice point number 2, cancel any credit card you don't need. If you no longer use that old department store credit card, or gas company credit card, or credit card from that bank you no longer deal with, cancel it. If the card is canceled, there is no way anyone can use it. Personally, I believe that in a perfect world, the ideal number of credit cards is 0, but since it's difficult to book a hotel room or rent a car without one, my advice is to have at most 2 credit cards. Have one main one that you use for everything, and that's the one you get your points or travel miles or rewards on, and have a second one as a backup from a different lender. That way, if your card is compromised, you have a backup card you can use while you're waiting for the new one to arrive. Point number 3, keep your credit limits as low as possible. Just because the bank says you qualify for a $10,000 credit limit doesn't mean you should accept the limit they suggest. If the most you ever spend is $2,000 in a month, like when you have to book plane tickets and a hotel for your vacation, get a card with a $3,000 or maybe a $5,000 limit. The lower the limit, the less risk for you. Point number 4, where possible, get electronic copies of your statements, not paper copies in the mail. How hard would it be for someone to steal your mail? If they can, they now know your name, address, and credit card number. That's not good. Point 5, this is obvious, but never share your PIN. That way, even if your card is stolen, it can't be used at a chip reader machine. But what do you do if you want to share your credit card with someone, like your spouse or your child? Either get them a secondary card on your account with a different card number, or apply for a new card that they can use but with a small limit. So if your kid is going off to university and they need emergency access to credit, get them a card with a $500 limit, to minimize your risk. Point number 6, only provide your social insurance number where required by law. This is a big one. Your social insurance number is a unique identifier for the federal government. They use it when you pay your taxes or get unemployment insurance or for your government pension or other government services. The key point is that it is for use by the federal government and no one else. So when you open a savings account at the bank needs your social insurance number because they have to report the interest you earn every year so you can pay taxes on it. Makes sense. So tell me this. When I buy a cell phone, why does the application form request my social insurance number? What does a cell phone have to do with my taxes? The answer, of course, is nothing. But the cell phone company wants it, so when they do a credit check on you, they are more likely to match you up correctly with your credit report. Don't give it to them. They don't need it, and it's not even lawful for them to ask for it. The more people who know your social insurance number, the more likely it is that one of them will use that number to apply for credit in your name, so don't give it out unless it's required by law. Now, those of you who are astute listeners will be saying, well, that's all good advice, but checking my transactions online every few days won't tell me if someone has stolen my identity and set up a new credit in my name. Well, that's true. You don't know to check your transactions on a card you don't know exists. So what can you do? Well, the obvious answer, and this is point 7, is that you should regularly get a copy of your credit report and review it to see if there are any debts you don't know about. Of course, this is a bit of a pain because you have to go online or phone or fill out a form and mail it in, but it's the only way to see what's on your credit report. The laws are different in each province, but for those of you who are listening to this podcast in Ontario, we have a law called the Consumer Reporting Act. And Section 12 of that act says that every consumer reporting agency shall, at the written request of a consumer and during normal business hours, clearly and accurately disclose to the consumer without charge, A, the nature and substance of all information in its files pertaining to the consumer at the time of the request, B, the sources of credit information, C, the name and, at the option of the consumer reporting agency, either the address or telephone number of every person on whose behalf the file has been accessed within the 3-year period preceding the request, etc. There's a bunch of other stuff. And they shall inform the consumer of his or her right to protest any information contained in the file under Sections 13 and 14 and the manner in which a protest may be made. The key point here is that, according to the law, there is no limit on how many times you can request a credit report for free. I haven't tried to get a credit report each month, but this may be a strategy to stay on top of your credit history. Now, we did call the Ministry of Government Services here in Ontario, and they told us that you can only have your credit report for free once a year. But we said, wait a minute, Section 12 doesn't say anything about once a year. The government employee said, well, I don't know the specifics of that section, but I've attended a number of meetings where it has been discussed, and it was definitely limited to once a year. So I don't know who to believe, the written law or the government employee that interprets the law. I'd be interested to hear from listeners if you are denied a credit report if you request it more than once a year. And yes, I realize that there are 2 main credit bureaus in Canada. So you could get your credit report from Equifax today, and then in 6 months get it from TransUnion, and then in another 6 months get it from Equifax again. So that way you're getting a credit report every 6 months, but that still means it's 6 months before you realize there's a problem. Point number 8. There is another strategy you can use to protect yourself. Section 12.1 of that same act says that, quote, a consumer may require a consumer reporting agency to include in the consumer's file an alert warning persons to verify the identity of any person purporting to be the consumer, end quote. So you could put an alert on your credit file requiring all lenders to verify your identity before giving you a loan. How practical is this? I don't know. If you're planning to get a mortgage or car loan or new credit card in the near future, requiring the lender to verify your identity may slow down the credit granting process, so it may hurt you. I don't know. However, if you aren't planning to borrow any money in the near future, this may be an extra level of protection for you. Now, of course, there is a third option to protect yourself, but I'm reluctant to recommend it. You can subscribe for alerts from Equifax. Here's the catch. The very people who expose the data of 140 million Americans to hackers now want to charge you $20 a month to tell you if there is any suspicious activity on your account. What a great business. Put your information out there and then charge you money to tell you if any of your information is out there. Here's the deal. It costs $19.95 a month, and for that fee, Equifax will give you alerts of any key changes to your Equifax credit file, and it gives you daily access to your credit score and credit report. So is it worth paying $240 per year to find out if there are issues on your credit report? I don't know. That's a question that only you can answer. But it certainly upsets me that I have to pay money to access my data. Remember, you and I are the product, not the customer. So I'm not happy that I have to pay to see my data. Think about it. When you go to the gas station to buy gas, does the gas station charge you money to tell you if there's any gas in their tanks? Of course not. Gas is the product. You pay to buy it. You don't pay to find out if it's there. If my data is the product, why should I have to pay to see which of my data they have? So those are my 8 suggestions for how you can protect yourself. Now, let me tell you what I think the government should do. Regular listeners to this podcast will know that I'm not a big fan of government rules and regulations. I find that they tend to just mess things up rather than make things better. However, in this case, I sign one form to apply for one credit card, and for the rest of my life, all of my personal data is out there for the world to see, and there is nothing I can do to get it back. Even if I pay all of my debts, my information is still in the big computer in the sky. Even if I pay all of my debts, Equifax still has my name, address, birth date, employment history, and social insurance number, and that puts me at risk. So, here are my suggestions for changes to the law that I would like to see the government enact. First, credit reporting agencies should be prohibited from having my social insurance number. They should not be allowed to report it on my credit report. They don't need it, so eliminate it. That would make it slightly harder for hackers to steal my identity. Second, since it's my data, I should be allowed to access it whenever I want for free. I realize that in the old days it was costly for Equifax and TransUnion to mail a copy of my credit report to me. They had to pay for the employee time to print the report, and the paper to print it on, and the stamp to send it. But today we have computers, so in theory there is virtually no cost to them providing online access to my data. Every consumer should have the right to access their data online as often as they want. Since I'm a reasonable guy, I would agree that only my data would be available to me for free. So data that Equifax calculates, like my credit score, would not be available to me for free. They could charge me for that data, and I could pay for it if I wanted it. That seems to me like a reasonable compromise. Third, I think that as a consumer, I should have the ability to create electronic alerts for myself for free so that whenever a new credit item appears on my credit report, or whenever anyone does a credit check on me, I will get an email or text alert. Again, this would all be done by computers, so it wouldn't cost Equifax that much, and it would give me greater protection. In fact, I know that Equifax already has this technology because they sell it to collection agents. A collection agency or a bank can put an alert on your file so that if they can't find you, but then you apply for new credit or change your address or phone number, they get an alert so they can resume collection activities against you. Again, I know that I am the product, not the customer, but since the technology exists, I think I should benefit from it. Here's the bottom line. I realize that these suggestions I'm making will cost Equifax money, and they may make it more difficult for lenders to evaluate my credit worthiness. But Equifax violated my trust by exposing all of this secret data, so they are now going to have to suffer the consequences of their actions. So, to conclude, here's my advice. To protect yourself, review your credit card and other transactions at least once per week, cancel any credit you no longer require, keep your credit limits low, get electronic copies of all statements, not paper copies, only provide your social insurance number where required by law, request a copy of your full credit report as often as possible, consider placing an alert on your credit report requesting that lenders verify your identity. And I think the government should do the following 3 things. Prohibit credit reporting agencies from having my social insurance number in their databases. Allow consumers to access their data for free electronically as often as they want, and allow consumers to receive free electronic alerts whenever information on their credit report changes. Will the government change the law? I don't know, but if we don't ask, it won't happen. Regardless, there are things you can do to protect yourself, so you should take action now. One final point. The world is changing, and changing fast. It's likely that the very concept of a credit bureau, a third party that is the guardian of your information, may not exist in the future. I assume that new technology will take their place. Perhaps banks will have facial recognition scanners in their branches to verify your identity, and perhaps blockchain technology will be used to securely store our data. Either way, I wouldn't want to be Equifax right now. That's our show for today. Full show notes, including a full transcript of today's show and links to everything we talked about, can be found at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.